There's no question that university students now are having a tougher time of it than their parents had, and of course they don't like paying hefty fees. The bigger question is what the new system of funding is doing to higher education, which raises the familiar question, what is a university for? David Grossman went to today's rally.
They are no longer protesting about something that might happen. Students in England face a new reality. Higher fees are with us, and they're not universally popular.
A lot of my friends don't really have anything to look forward to once they graduate because it's such a difficult climate to get a job. It's not fair, like having all that burden of debt.
There's a few kind of schemes within the uni to kind of ease it, but I mean, obviously, it's tough.
It's clear there's still plenty of anger about the decision to increase tuition fees, but beyond that, what has been the impact on the higher education sector as a whole? For a start, let's look at student numbers. There were predictions before this change came in that we were going to see a massive dropping off in the numbers of people going to university.
If you look at the graph, it appears that that drop-off has happened, but much of this is accounted for by many students who would have come this year forgoing their gap year and starting their degrees last year to avoid the fees. Allow for this, and the graph for England, where fees went up, looks pretty similar to that of Scotland and Wales, which have their own systems of university finance.
So much for student numbers. What about the composition of the university population? Has there been, as some predicted, a massive drop in the numbers of students from poorer backgrounds going to university?
There are some suggestions when you look at the applications this summer that it's students from richer backgrounds, more prosperous socioeconomic backgrounds who've decided not to go to university. The numbers are very small though, so you can't read too much into it, but certainly it looks as if students from poorer backgrounds are still going to university, which is not what many people predicted.
Of course, the government put a lot of work into making sure students from poorer backgrounds weren't put off applying, with all sorts of help available. However, one study of this help suggests that students won't know exactly what they'll qualify for until they get well into their first term, which seems of limited value if the purpose is to persuade them to apply in the first place. Simon Hughes advised the government on fair access. He says we clearly have more work to do on this system.
There's money given, increasing amount for scholarships. I'm trying to make sure that the decision is made by government to move it from scholarships for fees or living costs to scholarships for living costs. And if we can get that message across, there will be help for youngsters who need it with your living costs, and you don't have to worry about the fees unless you're earning, and then it will come out of your salary. Then I think we'll really have broken the back of the issue.
And some universities are actually offering less help for poorer students. If we divide universities into 5 groups, with the most prestigious on the left, here's the help they offered last year, and here's what's on offer this year. The higher up the pecking order, the more that's being done. Another thing that we can say has changed are the kinds of courses that students are opting for. More vocational courses like medicine, dentistry, engineering, physical science and law have only seen small declines in applications from last year. However, the big hit has been taken by courses that less obviously lead to a job, like creative arts and design, social studies and non-European languages, each suffering a double-digit drop.
Bluntly, the universities that are not delivering courses that do well for students, where the student feedback says this is not, or the buildings are not good, or but we don't get enough seminars and lectures, those courses will go, and the finances of universities will not in the end be able to fund courses that aren't seen to be good by the people going.
Police are clearly determined that these protesters won't get near Parliament. However, Parliament has clearly got at them, at least they feel like they've been victimised. But MPs will say that wasn't the plan, it wasn't the objective. The purpose of increasing tuition fees was to shore up the future of higher education funding. So, in that context, how successful have the changes been?
If we look at the projections for university finance going forward, this line shows what the government is putting in, falling off rapidly. But this is more than offset by the rise in fees and the increase in foreign students. On paper, this all looks healthy enough, but it's dependent on keeping enrolment stable and that the government doesn't put more barriers in the way of foreign students.
Clearly, it's a very difficult issue with the immigration and visa reforms that are going on at the moment, and it's something we're acutely aware of, that we need to make sure that we have a coherent policy in terms of immigration and international students, and I'm not sure that's the case at the moment.
These students have clearly made up their minds about higher fees, and we can't exactly expect any student to ever relish having to pay more. Although it is early days for the new system, we do appear to be seeing the start of a re-evaluation of university as a choice, with some now deciding to change what they study and others not to go at all.
Well, now, Professor Howard Hodgson is an Oxford academic and member of the Council for the Defence of British Universities. Beverly Nielsen, who's Director of Employer Engagement at Birmingham City University, is also here. Nadeem Zahawi is a Conservative MP and former businessman who sits on the Business Innovations and Skills Committee. And Alice Swift is a student who was on the march today. What's wrong with the re-evaluation, Professor, then, of what universities are for?
Well, I don't think anyone would deny that universities need to be re-evaluated incrementally on an ongoing basis.
Why are you against it, then?
What I'm against is the fundamental and radical overhaul of one of the finest university systems in the world. It's one of the great national assets this country possesses. It's universally regarded around the world as one of the finest things that Britain does. That it should be incrementally overhauled in new economic circumstances, I think, is undeniable. But that's not what the government has set out to do. From the moment the Brown Review was published, from the moment the White Paper was published, the government was talking about a fundamental, radical shake-up of higher education in England. And it seems to many people inside of universities as a very imprudent thing to do in an area where the universities have never been more important to the knowledge economy, and our competitive advantages have never been more difficult to obtain, to fundamentally overhaul one of the best things we have.
An epitaph you seek for your government.
Well, I sat on the committee that took the evidence. I wish Howard was there to listen to the evidence. Let's not... Howard's getting stuck on language. The reality is we're putting students at the heart of the system, and that's a good thing. Let me just explain what that means. It means students now are able to compare and contrast and see which courses are the right ones for them. More engagement with business, more engagement with employers, not just businesses, but third sector, service sector, with universities. But just one last thing, Jeremy, before I finish. The old system, if you're earning £21,000 today, you'd be paying £470 a month in payment back. Under the new system, if you earn over £21,000, that's when you start paying. If you earn £22,000, you only pay £90 a year. There's so much misinformation about the fees.
Less concerned with how these fees are paid back than with what it is doing to education. Now, what is your job at Birmingham City University?
I'm Director of Employer Engagement.
What does that mean?
Well, what that means is that we're looking all the time about how employers are involved in the relevance of what our students are learning. So we're working with employers on co-creation of courses to ensure that we're meeting the needs of employers.
You're churning out a workforce for them?
Well, no, I think we would regard in our education, the education that we're providing, as so much more than just equipping them for their work. But they have knowledge, they have the ability to think creatively, critically, analytically, work in teams.
That's what students wanted. They want a job at the end of it all.
Yes, of course they want a job, but I think the way that our university system is being shaken up at the moment to be beholden to the market is extremely dangerous. I mean,
why on earth is it dangerous?
It's very dangerous. So at the University of Birmingham, loads of departments that aren't seen as something that can contribute to a market economy or to the dictate of a market economy, things like archaeology, antiquities, sociology, all of these subjects are very much under threat, and because they're not beholden.
Not enough students want to study them.
No, that's not true at all. There are plenty
how can they
of
be under threat?
They are under threat at the University of Birmingham. They are threatening to close down these departments as we speak.
Look, if there were lots of students who wanted to study those subjects and pay the fees to do so, I suspect they'd be kept open.
No,
wouldn't they?
absolutely not. No, there are lots of students that want to study these subjects. Sociology especially. The University of Birmingham has over the past couple of years
closing
tried
these
to
subjects
close
down,
sociology
then?
down when there is a huge demand for sociology. That's why it can't close it down.
There you are. Perhaps you could engage with that.
Well, look, if University of Birmingham is closing down courses where there's massive demand, then there's something wrong at the university. But I don't think that is happening. The reality, Alice, that if you look at the evidence, and we saw it in the programme, the Russell Group universities, and this is the same in America, where you see places like Harvard do really well in attracting students from lower socio-demographic backgrounds into their courses, because they become much more aware of their responsibility, their social responsibility. And that's beginning to happen with the Russell Group, which is what the evidence shows. Now, at the Select Committee, we're going to monitor the process. We're going to monitor this thing. But the idea that, you know, if you're saying that the market is a bad thing because it gets employers and employers, not just private sector, but the service sector, the third sector, engage with universities, I disagree with you. I think that's a good thing.
The University of Birmingham has departments that are beholden to the fossil fuel companies, beholden to them, and teach such a wide variety of oil industry-based practices. In 30 years' time, what are we going to do when we reach a climate catastrophe? The market works on short-termism, and it does not consider these aspects at all, and we're completely beholden to it under this new regime.
Professor, there's another question here, and it is about the broader social context. Is what, frankly, I mean, I don't want to be rude, but what is the point of people paying their taxes? And you're early modern intellectual history on?
Yes.
Subjects, you know, most of us don't really understand. Well, why should the taxpayer support that sort of activity?
Well, I mean, there's a huge range of answers to that question. The public sort of market-facing face of the university is crucially important, but what universities fundamentally
What's your contribution to the market?
Well, I'm here discussing it on your program.
Well, you're not getting paid much for this, I'll tell you.
Indeed. As a matter of fact, the project which I direct at the Oxford University has raised $2.5 million of American money. So if you're asking for a direct contribution to the market, there you have it. This is more money than I'm going to make in a very substantial fraction of my career. Okay. But if you're asking a more general question, which I presume you are,
yes,
which is about why every modern, Western, prosperous, democratic country for the last 50 years has supported a publicly subsidized university system, then there are all kinds of reasons for that. There is the fact that a democratic polity depends upon having an educated electorate. There's the fact that innovation is fundamentally necessary for the economy. There's the fact that our cultural industries as well, which are a very vital and important part of our economy, depend directly on universities.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah,
but the really extraordinary thing, and this is something which hasn't been picked up in the media, this is the first time in modern history that a publicly funded university system has been eliminated with the stroke of a pen. There's now
the stroke of the pen. Students just don't want to study a lot of these subjects. No,
I'm talking about the fact. I'm talking about the fact that in every other country, a university system exists which is directly funded by taxpayers' money. England has just done something which is radical and unprecedented, which is to remove overnight, at the stroke of a pen, the direct funding of universities.
I'd just like to make the point about innovation. I mean, it's absolutely essential to our economy that we innovate. We've just done a study through our Think and Do tank at Birmingham City University, which demonstrating the enormous value of design and innovation to our economy in the Midlands. So we're, you know, this is all about encouraging radical innovation, encouraging lateral thoughts, probably the sorts of things that come very natural in your sort of area. So I don't think it's one or the other.
Do you think he's a luxury?
No, I don't.
Do you think that society is in any way harmed if, as, let's say for the sake of argument that Alice is right, let's say that certain subjects cease to be taught in universities, and it doesn't matter whether it's specifically archaeology or something else, but something that is a non-vocational subject. Does society suffer because of that?
I think really it's about understanding where the value is of these different subjects. I
would
think
say society does suffer.
Why?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because education is a public good, it is a social good, and it can't be beholden to whatever the short-term prospects are of the market.
That's a mere assertion.
It doesn't need to be a trade-off. You know, we don't need to go just purely market driven.
But the evidence does seem to suggest that students are voting with their feet.
Some are, and what you'll get is some of the very successful universities will continue to subsidise courses that they think are for the social good. They are good things to have in a society. There's nothing wrong with that.
Do you think it matters, then, that fewer people wish to study non-European languages?
Well, I think it matters that we make sure that there's enough courses, enough diversity in the economy so that there is choice for everyone.
And that's not what your system is allowing to happen.
The system.
I mean, this is fundamentally important point. I mean, the ascendant economies of the world are not in Europe. If we want to understand and be able to gauge with the ascendant economies in the world, we certainly have to maintain a capacity to teach our young people non-European languages. Now, if the market signals seem to be suggesting to students that this is not a profitable activity, then we're dealing with market failure. The market signals are failing to convince students to study things that we desperately need. Can I make a more general point here?
You better be quick.
I will try. The real point is that although engaging directly with the market is one of the very important things that universities do, the really fundamental, crucial, unique things that universities do is stay way back from the short-term cycle of journalism, the short-term cycle of politics, the short-term cycle of business, and engage people's mind with the really big problems. Now, we're entering a century in which we're being faced by the most enormous problems, and it is vitally important that universities not be swallowed up by the short-termism of the political cycle on the one hand or the economic.
All right, okay. Thank you all very much.